Hi guys, and welcome to today's video. So today's a little bit different. A couple of people were asking for me to do some more voiceovers, so I thought I would do a voiceover of one of my training sessions during the week, and then a voiceover of my 2 rounds then at the weekend at the show. So you can kind of see how the training you do at home and how it kind of related to the show, and then how that went and my thoughts behind it. So I videoed most of the entire training session, and I'm going to show you bits from each section. So at the moment I'm just doing some trotting around and some warming up. I just tend to trot him around on a bit of a soft contact, let him stretch a little bit. He was actually a little bit fresh on this day. Usually I try and encourage him to really stretch very long and low, but he was quite fresh, so I just stuck with a bit of a more relaxed outline, but still a little bit in my hand, just so I had some more control. And I really focus on bending him to the left and bending him to the right around the corners. And then when I changed the rein, there's a very obvious change in bend, just so he stretches around, just so he stretches his back and stretches around my leg, and he's on the aids and feeling good. Then I pop him up into the canter. So Dali actually has a really lovely canter. It's very, very comfortable. And although he's a very big horse, he's actually quite balanced now. It's taken a long time, but he's quite soft in the hand, which is quite enjoyable to ride, not gonna lie. When I'm schooling him at home, I always ride him in a snaffle and no spurs, just the kind of bare minimum, just because then when I go to a show, I do put him in a little bit of a stronger bit, but it means that when I go to shows, that actually has an effect. He's not just getting dull to the strength of a pelham. So that's why I always try and school all the horses in a snaffle, and ideally compete them in the snaffle too, but he's just such a big horse, and sometimes I just do need that little extra bit of control. So that's why I ride him in the pelham at shows. So he used to find flying changes very difficult. It took him a long time to get the balance and get the strength in the canter. So I always do a couple of flying changes in my warm-up. Going from right to left, the flying change is quite strong, and he always kind of gets it. It's quite easy, although sometimes he does do a bit of a buck and stuff, but that's just him having a little bit of a mess. But our flying changes from left to right recently have been a little bit weaker. He doesn't always get them behind, and often they're a little bit late. And it's actually interesting because I noticed that a lot more in this day's training. So I do a couple of left to right canter changes, and then in the show you'll see that they are a little bit weak in the competition as well. So it's just definitely something I'm going to really focus on. Once I've done a few flying changes and just a little bit of circling and normal cantering around, I do a little bit of going backwards and forwards in the pace within the canter. So I ride him forward for a few strides and then bring him back and ride him forward and back again. Just really making sure I have those gears and he's really listening to me. With Dali, he can do a very small little canter, but it's actually the transition between the forward and back which is his issue. So in a round, I can get him to do a very small canter, but he used to really kind of fight, and it would take 3 or 4 strides for me to shorten him up. But if it's only a 3 or 4 or 5 stride distance, then obviously that's not good enough, so it needs to be a lot more on the aid. So that's something I practice a lot. And again, because I practice it in the snaffle, then when I'm at the show I have a little bit of a stronger bit, so I don't even need to use half as much rein just to get him back to me, which is great. Again, on the left rein, I don't feel like he is as balanced, and he doesn't come back quite as well as the right rein. And this just translates into the fact that his left to right lead is weaker, and it's weaker because he's not as balanced on the left rein. So when he doesn't have a balanced canter, he can't do a good flying change. So you can see that when I've gone forward and back in the canter and really gotten that balance and gotten him soft and on the aid, then the flying change from left to right was really good, and it was just perfect, and it was calm, and it wasn't late behind. So one, I need to make sure when I'm asking for a flying change left or right that I have a good canter, and two, I need to work on just strengthening that left lead canter so that it is a little bit just better in general, because when we're in a round, I can't, spend 5 strides setting him up for a flying change. He just has to do it within the round, so we have a lot less time to manage the canter and get it perfect. So that's just something to work on with him. So then I'm doing a little course of jumps. So when I often jump these kind of cavalettis in courses of poles, just really helps working on my rhythm and obviously seeing strides and making sure I'm riding the correct number of strides. So the bending line was quite a long 6 strides. It's probably a 6 strides as if the poles were like 130. So when you're walking your distances, the length of the distance actually very much depends on the height of the jump, because if the jump's high, you'll be landing further away. Also, if the jump is an oxer, you'll landing a little bit closer to the jump than if it was a vertical. So all these things are important to take into account when you're walking strides. So in this case, it was a 6 strides, but 6 strides if it was a 130 jump. So because they're so small, it means it was quite a long 6 strides. So I do get 7 strides occasionally, or I do 6 then when I'm kind of riding up on a kind of inside line and don't go so wide. So it was just good practice to kind of get that feeling and get a better idea of how I need to ride them and kind of tune me up more than anything before the show. And then I also have some bounces in there. They were just verticals last week when I was riding a bit of a course, but I decided to put them up as bounces just to really get him sitting on his hocks and not just landing after the jump and just cantering away quite casually. It means that he lands and he's immediately thinking about the next jump, which is, not even a stride away, it's a bounce. So it's really good for getting him to sit up on his hocks. The other thing I need to really focus on through those bounces is his straightness, and in general over the single fences, but I think the bounces really bring to the surface if you're not straight. So I find on the right rein, he is often not as straight. He stays a little bit bent to the right when we come around to the fence. So on those right reins, I try and go a little bit wider. I try to use my left leg and my left rein to almost push him through the turn as opposed to pulling my right rein, if that makes sense. So it's almost like if you think about turning on the haunches, it's that kind of feeling through the turn, and that leaves you very, very straight. And then on the left rein, he's just generally a lot straighter, but sometimes I do find I lose a bit of momentum through the turns on the left rein, so that's just something else I need to think about. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, I think I definitely very much analyze the horses a lot, but I feel like this really helps when I think about exactly what I need to do through each turn. And they're never going to be even. All horses are going to be a little bit more one-sided than the other, so it's just a long-term focusing on evening that up and kind of strengthening their weak side, and then but still, focusing on our strong side as well. So that was the session. It was just quite simple, but just tuning us up, getting my eye in, making sure I'm riding well, riding forward enough. My last show I was holding too much and I wasn't riding forward enough, so you can see that I was in a bit of a half seat for most of the cantering, which really helps allow him to canter underneath me. And he's actually a lot lighter on my hand when I'm out of the saddle like that, which is interesting. You'd think it would be the opposite way around, but he actually definitely prefers when I'm a little bit out of the seat in the canter. So now it's time to move on to my competition that weekend. So this is 3 days after that last turning session. I just rode him on the flat and did some hacking between that session and the show. So this show is a league show at our local equestrian centre. It's not a really big standalone show, so it's perfect for getting out and just getting some rounds under your belt and getting some, brushing off the cobwebs, as I keep saying. So this is the 1.20 m, and he also jumps the 1.30 m. My dad is up on a hill, so it does make the jumps look a little bit small, but I promise that is what they were. So I start off, I kind of get out of the saddle a little bit. I do a nice circle to set him up. I find that that's really helped me kind of get a better stride to the first fence and get him a little bit sitting on his bum. So now I'm coming to the first fence. It's a nice oxer, very inviting, very easy. Again, you can see here he landed on the left rein. We had to change to the right rein, but it was quite late. He's just united for 3 or 4 strides there. I was a little bit close to that vertical, which meant I had to ride forward a little bit for the 8 strides. It was 8 forward strides. He has just a huge, huge stride. So me riding forward is really just me relaxing my rein slightly. Now we're coming to a triple. So I did have to sit him back up after that longer 8 strides. 1 stride to an oxer, 2 strides to a vertical. Because it's an oxer to a vertical, it's really important to, really sit up for that last part. And he jumped that really well. Again, did our flying change. Now it was an oxer, 7 strides to this water tray, and then a very short 4 strides to an oxer. So I really had to sit up so then I could put leg on for the last stride. That's probably our most difficult type of line, where it's a, short number of strides. It's to an oxer. And then we jump this number 8, and then it's 9 strides down to this little vertical. Again, you can see disunited because it was a flying change from left to right, which he just didn't get it in time. So I just sat him up and rode him on the disunited, but just tried to keep the balance. Now it's 5 strides down to this double. Again, it's an oxer in, so I really shortened so I had enough energy to jump the oxer, and then sat up nice and quick for the vertical coming out. And then we're coming to the last fence, which is just a nice vertical there, which he jumped nicely. So it was a nice clear round. There was a couple of moments like the flying changes and also the CW defense where I rode him a little bit close to it that I wanted to improve on. So then we come out and then we jump the 130. So now this is the 130 round. As you can see, I finally got warm enough I could take off my jacket. It was such a cold day. So in the 130, I just wanted to focus on still having that nice rhythm. Like I felt like that pace was perfect for him and nice and forward without, getting too flat. But I also wanted to try and really work on the flying changes and, set him up a bit better and really ask him, a little bit stronger, just to say, look, you can't just be disunited. We really need to focus on this. So get a nice shot to the first fence, maybe a touch close to it. Get our flying change there. You can see, he's disunited for only 1 stride. He was just a stride late behind, which is no problem. I do get a better shot to this vertical, and then we get a nice 8 strides again to this oxer. But you can see I was a little bit quieter. I just waited a little bit more because we got a better shot to the vertical, so I didn't need to push so much for the oxer. Again, coming around to this double, I really sit him up. It's, a nice small vertical in, so you can ride in quite quiet, a bit of leg for the oxer, and then quiet again for the vertical. Again, the flying change, got it well this time. I just sat him up and I really asked him a bit stronger. We get a really good shot over this rainbow fence, and then he throws me forward a little bit, which I was annoyed about my riding there, but sat him up really nicely, and then he jumped this 4 strides really well. I was very, very happy with how he came back to me even after the big jump over the rainbow. There he was a little bit late behind with the flying change, probably because of how kind of disjointed I was for the previous. And then he got the flying change that time to number 9 within the 9 strides, which was a big improvement on the previous round. So I was very happy about that. Then we pop down here, get a really good shot here. It does mean I have to sit up a little bit more for the 5 strides. We were a touch close to the first part, but he jumped really, really well. And then just get him up in the canter again as we come to the last fence, which was just vertical. So I was very happy overall, 2 clear rounds, very good. Here again, I kind of just was a bit casual cantering away, but then I sat him up and said, no, come on, we do have to get the flying change. So yeah, it's just a bit of a process that I'll work on with him, but overall, really, really happy. Great day, 2 clear rounds, and big improvement from last weekend with my riding.